we're going to get going. We'll call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Burke. Commissioner Dunn.
Here.
Commissioner Arp. Here. Commissioner Gilmetti. Commissioner Guardino. Commissioner Inman. Here. Commissioner Kehoe. Here. Commissioner Madaffer. Commissioner Tavaloni.
Here.
Chair Alvarado.
Yes.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Item 2 is approval of the minutes.
Second.
Motion by Tavaloni, second by Commissioner Dunn. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Commissioners meeting for compensation.
I move we be compensated.
Been moved by Commissioner Arp, second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Executive Director's report.
Commissioners, thanks. Commissioners, today I wanted to report on a few items. First, very important, I wanted to let you all know that Commissioner Gilmetti was recently reappointed to the commission by the Senate Rules Committee.
My sentence isn't up.
You didn't get out.
And commissioners, also very important, I wanted to formally introduce Christina Asuri, the recently appointed Chief Deputy Director. And Christina, if you could please stand up, I'd like everyone here to see Christina. And you can sit down. And commissioners, I want to let you all know that Christina's been with us only for a short period of time, just this month, and she just steps right into the role, and just amazing, and just very much appreciate that she accepted this position. And I just look forward to continued working with Christina.
Very good. Welcome.
Okay. All right. And then, commissioners, as part of my report, I wanted to report back to you. The commission did participate in a tri-state commission meeting on June 17th with the commissions from Oregon and Washington. And as an outcome of that tri-state commission meeting, the executive directors from the other two state transportation commissions have contacted me and would like to work on a joint letter, a tri-letter, that we could together send to Congress to talk about and urge transportation funding. There's a focus that they would like to bring in on seismic safety and other matters. And so I will be working with those two other executive directors from those states, and we'll bring a draft letter back to you in August to share with you and seek your approval on that letter. And with that, my last item is you have before you a 2017 draft commission meeting calendar. And commissioners, this is an action item, and I request your approval of the 2017 CTC calendar. Thank you.
Motion by Gilmetti, second by Kehoe. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Okay, and commissioners, that concludes my report.
Any questions? Very good. Commission reports.
Quiet today.
Yeah, very good. Well, you know what? I have something. I'd like to invite Laurel to come forward, please. This is Laurel's last meeting. For some inexplicable reason, she thought she would be better off retired. I tried to intervene, but CalPERS wouldn't let me. But she has done just a great job. I don't think there's a thorough person when it comes to finding the minute details that we need to get our job done. And I want to
Thank you.
thank you very much and wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I want your phone. What's
And
Steph gonna do?
Laurel, I know. On behalf of the commission, Laurel, we do have a commission resolution that we have prepared, and this resolution recognizes you for all of your efforts and, is this speaking? Can you all hear me? You can hear me? It recognizes you for all of your efforts over the years to program transportation funding to very, very critical projects throughout the state and working with all the many stakeholders that you have had to work with over the years. And you've gained their respect and their trust, and they will truly miss you. And your coworkers, myself, will truly miss you, Laura.
Well, thank you very
So,
much.
with that, I want to present that to you. And the other recognition is from the governor. Governor Jerry Brown has recognized Laurel Jansen on 30 years of service to the state of California. And so that, and we will have these same for you.
Thank you very much.
So in addition, Laurel, we want you to open this. This is a gift from the commission staff, and we hope that you will treasure this. We hope that she will think of us when she sees it.
Oh, I love it. It's the logo in carved. I love it. That's cool. Oh, yeah, I'll have to keep this one. Thank you. Thanks. Do you carve those?
No other commission reports? Very good. Okay, now you got to top this, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No chance. Just a couple of things to report on. First, the California state budget was signed by the governor this week. We have a couple of trailer bills that are still pending, but the budget bill itself is done, and so that's always a good thing. On the transportation side, as Malcolm's going to fill in some more detail on this, but of course, we're commencing the road charge pilot project at the end of the week here. And I just want to report to the commission that this is getting obviously national attention. I had the good fortune to be in Washington, D.C. last week, and there's a lot of questions about the program while I was back there. And I'm also happy to report that some national news came out yesterday to talk about this project with us. And so I think something will be running on CBS either tonight or tomorrow about California trying this experiment. So it's certainly getting a lot of attention, and want to again express my appreciation for all the work of the commission and staff in helping us get that program going. So now we look forward to the difficult part of running the program and then preparing a report to the legislature at the program's conclusion. But very excited that we're at that stage, and Malcolm will fill in a little bit more detail on that. Second item I just want to mention that I know is up for some conversation later today as we continue to work on adopting the Sustainable Freight Plan, which we have received a letter from the Commission on. At least I've seen a draft of a letter from the Commission on. And we are commencing additional stakeholder meetings through July. I think the comment period ends on July 6th, and then we are doing additional stakeholder meetings, and we'll get to a final report later in the month. So just want to report on those things, and also express my appreciation for the time to spend during the retreat earlier today with commissioners. Thank you for that.
Any questions? Malcolm?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, just a few things that I'd like to touch on. I'll elaborate just a little bit on the details of the state budget as far as its implications to Caltrans. Our budget, as passed by the legislature and signed off on by the governor, is $9.7 billion for the department and all of its activities. This is the first budget that is below $10 billion that since Proposition 1B was voted on and approved, and that certainly reflects the decline in workload that we've had since that time. That budget supports 19,044 permanent and temporary positions for the department, which is down 164 from the year that we're concluding right now. That is a total department staffing reduction of 4,200 positions, which is just under 20% over the last 9 years. On the capital side, 2,900 positions of those were related to project delivery, recognizing the decline in workload, and that's actually a 26% decrease over the past 9 years in that. So that steady glide path as far as staffing levels reflects the decline in work, but that's what the implications of the budget that was signed off on earlier today. Of course, the second part of the budget for additional transportation revenue is being deferred to the special session. Brian also, Secretary Kelly also talked about the road charge pilot, which does start on July 1st. Some additional details about that. We had nearly 70 or over 7,800 volunteers for that program. We're going through the process right now, concluding the process of signing up and enrolling 5,000 of those participants to make sure that we have a good geographic spread throughout California, representing all the different folks that are in California. And we're going through that process, and that has gotten a lot of positive feedback, and we're ready to go over the next 9 months. Towards the end of that 9 months, the last 3 months or 3 months after that, we will be participating with a consultant private sector to write a review of that pilot, and there will be a certain amount of overlap during the administration of the pilot, as well as the evaluation of the pilot. So I wanted to make sure I shared that as well. Earlier this week, we also released the California Transportation Plan 2040. We've talked about that here, and you've also chimed in and offered up comments. So complementary to the Sustainable Freight Action Plan, the CTP 2040 was released, and we think that that is consistent with our strategic plan that we've adopted for the department as well. As we wrap up this fiscal year, I've been continuing to keep close tabs on our performance measures for project delivery and reviewing environmental documents, draft environmental documents, right-of-way certs, RTLs, getting projects ready to advertise, as well as projects that are closing out in construction. We will meet and exceed our performance metrics as far as percent of those projects being meeting those delivery commitments in every category except probably ready to list. There is a handful of projects out of the 244 projects that we have ready for, that we committed to deliver that are hanging in the balance, and our goal was 100% delivery. But I do think that there's probably a few projects that we will not be able to achieve over the next couple of days. But again, that should be just a handful of projects over out of the entire program, and that is reflective of us taking appropriate risk, I think, in delivering those projects. 2 weeks ago, we also had the ITS America annual meeting in San Jose, California. One activity that I got to participate in, besides multiple panels on autonomous and connected vehicles and other technology, including traveler information, was a demonstration ride and a truck platooning demonstration. You got a presentation from Peloton, I think last meeting. This is another effort for truck platooning that is paid for by 80% by the federal government, 20% by the state of California, and it is in cooperation with PATH at UC Berkeley and the department in moving that truck platooning connected and autonomous vehicle research forward, and we were able to pilot some of those vehicles, and they were there for the entire week, allowing participants to try to pilot that new technology. Earlier this week, we had our WASHTO meeting, which is myself and my other 17 counterparts in the Western United States, CEOs of the Departments of Transportation. One opportunity we did have was to talk to FHWA and their leadership on several items, which included freight, performance metric rulemaking, and we've also had the opportunity to talk directly to leadership about our Fast Lane Tiger and our road charge grant applications. And as California goes, we have a application in to augment our pilot project. And I also had the opportunity, I have the opportunity to chair the Western Road User Charge Consortium, and that group also has a application in, and that is an application that consists of 12 Western states. So the conversation continues across the country to explore other means of raising revenue for transportation and sticking with a user fee approach to that. And lastly, I'll note that on June 22nd, we sent out our last email Caltrans update. I know that at least one person read it because I got a note back from Commissioner Dunn. And then our mile marker, the Caltrans Performance Measures publication, went out on June 8th. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity to give you an update, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Questions? And then thank you. We don't have anybody here from the feds, but we all have to promise that we will not tell Vincent that we missed him. Regional agencies, Charkis.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Sarkis Kachek with the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments Regional Agencies Moderator. The regions met earlier today, and we had a very full agenda, but I'll just highlight a couple items for you. First, we honored Ms. Laurel Jansen on her retirement. We congratulated her. I have to say that on behalf of the regions, you've been a great partner, and anytime there's been any kind of problem or issue, you've always been very good with helping us with identifying a solution. So thank you for that, and congratulations. On the federal funding bill called FAST Act, we want to mention that the regions worked with Caltrans on identifying a consensus on the allocation of federal formula funds that come through the Federal Highway Administration. So we want to highlight that we reached consensus on that. We wanted to extend our appreciation and thanks to Caltrans on working with us on that. Regarding the earmark repurposing that you may have heard about, there's an opportunity through the federal government to identify new projects through the purposing of older earmarks. And so currently the regions are working on identifying new projects that these older earmarked funds can be used for. So we are working with Caltrans on that, and we'd like to extend a thanks to Caltrans for allowing the regions to work through this process. And then related to the active transportation program, you'll hear an update on the probably the number of applications submitted from California for Cycle 3. Those applications were due on June 15th. There's many applications submitted. This is still an important program for regions and local sponsors to help deliver critical safe routes to school and bike ped projects. And so we submitted those applications. Related to an item on your agenda tomorrow regarding time extensions for Cycle 1, we acknowledge that there are many time extensions that are being requested from Cycle 1. And so what we'd like to do is work with CTC staff and Caltrans on identifying solutions to help improve the delivery. In some instances, there were some unforeseen circumstances, but in other situations, we feel as though we have some suggestions that we'd like to work with CTC staff on to help improve delivery for future cycles. And then we will have a new moderator and vice moderator. The moderator for next fiscal year will be Melissa Garza with the Fresno Council of Governments, and vice moderator will be Patricia Chen with LA Metro. Patricia is in the back. Patricia will be serving as moderator for 2 months while Melissa is on maternity leave, and so we wanted to congratulate Melissa on the birth of her son. And finally, this is my last meeting as moderator. I know. Gosh, you're gonna miss me, Commissioner Dunn. I know. I'll still be coming to the meetings, but not as moderator. But I just wanted to extend thanks and appreciation to my peers for honoring me with this opportunity to serve as moderator. It's not that often that something like this happens, so I wanted to thank them for that. I also wanted to thank CTC and Caltrans staff for putting up with me for the last year. There were many doodle surveys and conference calls, but you won't be seeing my name too frequently anymore. But I did want to express my appreciation and thanks to everyone. So with that, I conclude my presentation, and I can take any questions at this time.
We just want to thank you for being a good partner, Sarkis.
Thank you.
Been a great year. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Rural counties. Jerry.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I just want to acknowledge Sarkis and his role as the RTPA moderator. He's done a tremendous job, and we appreciate his partnership, certainly. And as well, Laurel, congratulations on your retirement. We always appreciate her updates and concise communication when she comes and presents before the Rural Counties Task Force, and she's been a great asset to us as we work through all the funding situations we've been in recently. With regard to the ATP, like Sarkis mentioned, we're very cognizant of the delivery challenges with Cycle 1, and we're going to work with the RTPA group to develop strategies that ensure successful delivery in future cycles. We're following closely the RTP and CTP guidelines update. Look forward to the presentation tomorrow and the later workshops in July. The recent fiscal year 16-17 Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant awards were announced. And for this funding round, the maximum award amount was increased from $500,000 to $1 million, only for the 18 MPOs in the state. And that was done the day before the original deadline for the grants. This increase in maximum award amount was of concern to the rural agencies, as many of us work hard to secure these grants to develop sustainable multimodal and transit-friendly transportation systems in our communities. The Sustainable Community Grant Program provides $9.8 million statewide, and for this round, 5 applications were awarded at or above the $500,000 funding cap, and that's equivalent to 30% of that of the funds made available in this round. And this comes at a time when AB 2796 has proposed to set aside funds in the ATP for additional planning and non-infrastructure efforts, and at a time when the MPOs have a carryover balance of $12.9 million in metropolitan planning or PL funds, as well as a carryover of $6 million in FTA 5303 funds, and all of those funds could be used for planning for the MPOs. So while I understand that the MPOs are working hard to lower this amount, we believe it's unfortunate that those funds were not considered before changes were made to this statewide program. It's our hope that future sustainable communities grant programs will revert to the $500,000 maximum in order to allow more opportunities for sustainable community planning around the state. Lastly, this is my final update as well as the chair of the Rural Counties Task Force. It's been 2 years, and I really, really appreciate the opportunity and the collaboration and coordination. I hope that you've found my updates to be informational and informative, and I appreciate my colleagues giving me this opportunity. So with that, thank you all very much. Maura Toomey will serve as the chair for the next 2 years, and the vice chair is Woody Deloria. He's from El Dorado County Transportation Commission. Any questions?
We'd like to also thank you,
Okay, thank you.
for all the work that you've done the last couple of years.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Any other questions? Self-help? I didn't see Diane. Here we go.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Commissioners, Chair Alvarado, Tricia Almiron for Keith Dunn. Very brief update on the behalf of the coalition. On the state side, we look forward to expanding our membership this November. There are currently 10 initiatives to be on the ballot, 5 of which are new, the other 5 extensions. On the federal side, the coalition continues to work on the FAA reauthorization with our proposed amendments on the aviation fuel tax. Be happy to take any questions.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go to item 12, innovation and transportation. Garth.
Sure. Commissioners, informational item 4.3 is our standing item on innovations in transportation. And this month we're fortunate to have John Sadow from Scoop Technologies. And Scoop is an app that commuters can use to carpool. I would like to turn it over to John and hear a little bit more about Scoop.
Excuse me. Thanks, Garth. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I appreciate you having me here today. I've spent just a couple of minutes talking to you about Scoop. I want to keep an eye on the time, and feel free to just wave me down or yell at me to sit down if you get tired of listening to me. But this is an exciting thing for us to get to share with you, because I think Scoop's story is quite different than what I think we're familiar with reading in terms of how private sector companies coming out of especially Silicon Valley tend to work with public organizations, local governments, regional governments, et cetera. And frankly, I think what we're able to accomplish, which I'll share a little bit about with you, is almost entirely derived from our ability to work with the public sector to find a way to solve a problem that's meaningful for all of us. So just to tell you a little bit about the problem that we think about, which I would venture to bet that this is one of the few rooms I've been in where almost everyone thinks about it as much, if not more, than I do, and how we've come to solve that problem. This picture is always indicative, one, because it's actually quite dated. If you look at the cars, and the candid situation is that this is still what every road, at least in San Francisco, looks like. If anyone here is from LA, you probably tell me it's a lot worse because this is an LA picture. The reality is that congestion in our metro areas is one of the, if not the top problem, pretty much in every local community or regional community in the state for sure, and especially across the country and really the world. There are 100 million Americans who drive alone to work by themselves every single day across the United States. There are tens of millions of them in California alone. As a group, they spend more than $100 billion just on commute costs, and the stat that we like to talk about the most is the estimated time spent in traffic because of congestion is roughly, or the estimated time is roughly 7 billion hours. That's not the time we spend in cars, that's the time we spend extra in our cars each year just because there's congestion. If you do some fun math, at about $20 an hour, that totals just about 1% of annual GDP in the United States. So that kind of puts in perspective just how much that takes out of our communities. The reality is that this is something that we believe very deeply in trying to solve, and we believe that we are in an environment now where the technological improvements and the mobility improvements of what it means to know who you are in a car, know where you're going, and how to connect with somebody else in that car actually makes it possible for the first time for us to take two of those cars and turn them into one, which seems like a very basic, very novel concept that unfortunately has not been met with a lot of success over the last few decades, but Scoop is trying to change that. So to put it in perspective, in terms of what our mission is as a company, our entire focus is on how we reduce passenger trips and driver trips going back and forth to work. We are trying to eliminate traffic and reimagine the way that we think about transportation and transportation networks by giving, and in order to do, and by doing that, give life back to commuters who spend an exorbitant amount of time in the car trying to get to work every day. Put a different way, we're just trying to make carpooling work. We're trying to make it a little less difficult, a little easier to say, you know what, we're headed to the same direction and we're going to the same company. So how about we just put each other in the same car and take a couple cars off the road. I'll talk a little bit about how Scoop works, and I want to get into what's worked so far, and I'll spend a little less time on the product and more about the results, and then I'll talk a little bit about where I think our relationship with public entities and the government can help accelerate what we're doing, especially with respect to your overall goals as a commission and just as different transportation entities across the state, and then hopefully beyond that. So Scoop is interesting, right? So the way that it works is we're not trying to make things all of a sudden be on demand. We're not trying to take people off public transit. What we're simply saying is we know that when people think about going to work, 80% of them are going to drive alone. And we also know that going to work is a very habitual, very planned behavior. You may change between 8:30 in the morning or 9 in the morning, but generally speaking, you're going to work most days of the year. Other than brushing your teeth and eating every day, there's not much else you're going to be doing as often. Whether you like it or not is a whole different story. So the way we think about our application is everything is trip by trip. And so when people schedule, mornings and evenings are different. Day to day is different. You can use Scoop just in the mornings. You can use Scoop just in the evenings. You can use Scoop just on Tuesdays. That's something that we thought was quite a bit different because the challenge with carpooling historically has been that it's very difficult to commit to a carpool knowing that your meeting times changes, your obligation to your family changes, your work schedule changes for different reasons. We actually let you build a carpool routine that can flex to your own changes in schedule. Everything is scheduled ahead of time. So by 9:15 at night, you know exactly what your carpool is for the next morning. You're not committed to that carpool. I may go in the morning with Chair Alvarado, but I may go in the afternoon with someone completely different. That's a pretty fundamental change in the way we thought about carpooling. Just a funny story, when we were first starting out, we would get emails from people who were going with different people in the afternoon than the morning, concerned about the person that they went with in the morning, saying, what happened to Joe? How am I going to get him home? And the reality is there's a lot of people moving in the same corridor every day. We can mix and match that based on the fact that Joe wanted to leave at 5 and I needed to stay till 6. So we've tried to find the pain point of what it means to actually share a trip between two people who are not professionals. So that's one of the biggest things. Nobody's a contractor, nobody's an employer. We are simply reimbursing folks up to that 54 cents a mile reimbursement limit under the IRS regulations. And the average trip for a rider is just $6 for a 20-mile trip. So to put that in perspective, we're about 90% cheaper than an Uber or a Lyft or some other type of rideshare business. So this is something that people can actually depend on and use every day. The average driver saves 50 to 100% of their commute costs in terms of gas, depreciation, maintenance, things like that. And the average rider saves about 25 to 35%. So everyone is winning in this scenario, especially the communities where cars are being taken off the road. So I'll talk about a little bit about what that means and the impact we've had in the Bay Area. Historical context, we started Scoop last January. We launched after building out our team and sort of getting the foundation in place. We launched in the Bay Area on our first route in August of 2015. So we're just coming up on about 10 months. In the first 10 months, we've built a network of more than 20,000 commuters in the Bay Area from zero. We are the largest carpool network in the Bay Area for certain, and most likely in California, if not the country, in terms of the fact that, candidly, there are not that many carpool networks that have been effectively built across different metros, save for a couple good casual carpool instances in the Bay Area, in DC if you're into slugging, or in Houston. To put that in perspective, we've done about 80,000 trips, meaning people in cars together who are carpooling. That's 40,000 vehicles out of employer parking lots. That's nearly, we're coming up now on about 1 million pounds of carbon dioxide offset so far in just 10 months. And the average user is using Scoop for half of their weekly commutes. The key for us, the thing I've glanced over here, is we partner very, very closely with both private partners and employers, and also public partners. So when we go to market, we work very closely with the biggest companies in an area and say, okay, so Cisco is our biggest partner, and they're located in North San Jose, for anyone who's familiar with the Bay Area geography. And they are one of many companies in that area that, amongst the 5-10 biggest companies, you're talking about 35 to 50,000 people who work in about 3 different zip codes that are next to each other. So we go to market by working with Cisco and Brocade and a couple of the other major companies in that area and saying, we'll band you all together into a carpool network, knowing that there are enough people who all work at your companies who are coming from the same neighborhoods. So we're not going to consumers trying to find just enough people. Candidly, that's very difficult to do. And the trust reinforcement that you get from a company is incredibly powerful. The only thing that's more powerful than that is the trust reinforcement you get from a public sponsor. So we've worked, in terms of public sponsorships, we've worked with the Metro Transportation Commission in the Bay Area. We've worked with local entities like the City of Pleasanton, the Palo Alto Downtown Transportation Management Association. We've worked with different chambers of commerce. Everywhere we go, partnering with the public sector is part of what we are trying to do. And the ideal scenario is to take someone like, I'll give you our Palo Alto example. We have the Palo Alto Transportation Management Authority or Association. We have the Stanford Research Park, which is the biggest business park in Palo Alto. We work with individual companies like Tesla and Palantir. And as a result, we've now built the largest carpooling network into Palo Alto that's ever existed. We're doing thousands of carpool trips a month. And it's all because we're able to think about how to work together versus trying to, as other industries or other businesses do, potentially crowd out the way that the public sector might influence and help us solve this problem. And so I think the key for us, kind of to start to wrap up here, is we're finally showing that getting people to carpool, which is more economically efficient than highway expansion or other investments, which is actually more malleable to different geographies and different entities, can work. And candidly, I can tell you with real certainty, whether it's us or someone else, in the next 5 to 10 years, I think we'll start to see double-digit percentage changes in the way that people get to work driving their own vehicle for the first time in the last 60-plus years. And a lot of it's going to depend on how much different policy changes and investments can be made to help companies like Scoop and others find ways to really incentivize entire locales, entire regions to take cars off the road. To touch on a couple, and I don't know if there's time for questions, I'm happy to elaborate. For one, it's really important to us, if we're going to incentivize carpooling, to really think about the investments we're making in carpool lanes, to expand them, to connect them, and to enforce them more than anything else. There are reports that say up to 50% of the cars in the carpool lane do not have the required occupancy during peak travel times. We can tell you with certainty whether or not those cars have 2 people in the car, and we actually can offer quite a greater advantage in terms of those commutes. One of the other things is carpooling is not a recognized pre-tax benefit. So you can vanpool, you can use public transit, you can use any other type of alternative commuting. But if you are a carpooler, you are not allowed to set that or be reimbursed that from your company before taxes. It is the only type of alternative transportation that does not qualify. The main reason historically is it's really hard to know who carpools. Well, we know who carpools because we have their devices. We know where they're located. We know that they're in the same area together. So I think it's important for our state government and for our local governments, in addition to the way we think about this nationally, to start to say, how can we incentivize people to take their cars off the road, knowing that we can save billions of dollars on the consumer side and also on the government side in terms of where we're investing elsewhere. The other is we need to think about how this impacts things like parking requirements. I actually studied real estate before I ended up in technology, and I remember working on buildings where we had to build enough parking spots to meet the requirements of the footprint of that building. Those are old zoning laws, but we're now at a point where actually we don't want companies to have to build that much parking. We want them to build less parking and encourage instead to put those funds that they might put into parking into what it might mean to take cars off the road. And so I probably went over time, and I apologize, but hopefully it's somewhat interesting and informative. But the key for us is that Scoop is excited to be able to share that we are taking cars off the road in a very meaningful way for the first time, I think, of any carpool company. And your help and the help of the different organizations that I think are represented by the folks in the room is what has made that possible. So thank you to any of you who have been directly or indirectly involved, and we're eager to work with everybody here to find a way to continue to do this to reduce congestion everywhere from the Bay Area to Southern California and beyond, and hopefully beyond California as well once we get to it. So thank you very much for the time.
Any questions?
Yes. At the top, Fran.
Okay, now it's on. A couple of questions. So
ma'am.
how far in advance do I make my reservation?
Yeah, good question. So the way it works right now is you schedule your trip up until 9 o'clock at night the night before, and about 5-10 minutes later we confirm and we tell you who's in your car, how many people, where you're going. In the afternoons, it's up until 3:30 in the afternoon. As you can imagine, that covers most cases. We'd like to find ways to expand, and we are working on ways to expand that so that you have second chances in the morning, or you can delay in the afternoon if you have a late meeting. So over time, we'll become even more flexible. But right now, that's how the timing works.
And is it just 2 passengers max, or are you doing?
2 passengers max at the moment. The average carpool size is about 2.15 people. And we make certain considerations. So in the Bay Area, if you're coming over from the East Bay to San Francisco, there's a 3-person carpool requirement. So on that route, we only put 2 passengers in a car because candidly, it's not that exciting to put 1 passenger and still not be in the carpool lane. So we've started to fine tune around the restrictions with different carpool lane requirements.
But if you have a 3-person carpool requirement, wouldn't you want 3 people in your car? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sorry, 2 passengers, so 3 people total.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry about that.
Okay, so if I have a change after 9 p.m. or once I make my reservation, then do I pay whether I go or not, or?
Yeah, so you can cancel your trip. We have a cancellation policy. Obviously, things come up. Low single-digit percentages of trips actually don't happen. Most of them do. We see different reasons. Sometimes it's because the carpool we assigned, some reason doesn't work out for you. Sometimes it's because your kid gets sick in the morning and life happens, right? So you can cancel. We have a policy that lets you cancel up to once. You can cancel once for free every 2 weeks. If you cancel excessively, we start to charge a fraction of what you would have paid otherwise. And over time, that's one of those, that's where we'd like to have more second chances. So there are times where you might be in a canceled trip and I might be in a canceled trip, but it turns out we could have gone together in the first place. So over time, we'll find ways to have more and more backup plans. The goal being, of course, to find a way so that users can rely on us to get to work every single day, all the time.
But so if you do this matchmaking, then do they the next day just informally decide they're going to do the same thing and not go through the system, or what keeps them in the system?
It feels like an investor meeting. No, it's a great question. I think the way that we think about it is twofold. One is the investments from the private and public partners that we have, who are often starting as marketing and distribution partners and moving in over time to be economic partners, meaning that they'll subsidize trips. For one, if your company subsidizes through Scoop and you don't get that subsidy if you don't use Scoop, that's a nice kind of easy way to keep you using the system. We prefer to think about it as we take all of the things that have caused traditional carpools to fail and we do them for you and make them easier for you. So 5 times as many people have tried a carpool as actually continue to carpool, and it's usually because that carpool may work really nicely for you today or tomorrow or next week, but 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, something will change and that carpool will break as we talk about it. And so in our eyes, we make it quite easy for you to rely on us, knowing that you may go with me 70% of the time, but on the days where I'm working remote or I'm changing my schedule or if something happens, we always have a backup plan. I'll summarize that in, we have a favorites feature, and the average user has more than 3.5 favorites. So they're actually trying to cultivate a group of people they can rotate with without actually having to deal with the management of a rotating carpool.
And do I sign up to be a driver exclusively, or some days I'm a driver and some days I'm a passenger?
Totally up to you. You can drive, you can ride, or if you're really adventurous, you can say you're up for either one, and we'll assign one to you based on the best route that's available. And people, about 25% of people move back and forth between riding and driving.
And so we've gotten into some of these discussions with some of the other shared economy.
Sure.
Insurance, and how are you dealing with that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something, candidly, I think we're always looking at, and we're a different case, I think, very much than any of the contract/employer oriented rideshare business. In our case, if you and I wanted to carpool from here to, I don't know, to get a drink after this, right? We wouldn't, that wouldn't violate.
Call Uber if we're going to have a drink.
Sure, that's a good point. Let's say we're going to the airport. Let's keep it kosher. So we're going to the airport, you wouldn't have to pay extra insurance or be insured because you added a passenger in your car. That's a normal coverage of your insurance policy to take a friend in different settings. We've spoken to the insurance carriers. We're working very closely with them. And actually, all we are is a matchmaking service, right? You have full discretion over whether you want to pick that person up, whether you want to keep that trip, cancel that trip, how you're operating. Over time, we'll find ways to make sure that we're adding additional insurance backstops. But the reality is all we're doing is saying, hey, you two should get in the car together and carpool. The relationship beyond that is something that we don't manage ourselves.
Well, but I would think in the type of society we have where once you step into a transaction, you're subject to somebody's litigation when something goes wrong. So I want to encourage you, but I also want to make sure you think of all of the little things we need to think of.
Absolutely. I think the easiest answer is we think about this stuff quite often, and I think everyone can probably agree that we're in a bit of a different situation than other companies who are employing contractors to be the drivers, and we will continue to push ourselves over time to find ways to make sure that we're keeping our users safe and insured. And ultimately, I think that the nice thing in our scenario where we are all working together is I think everyone in this room will agree that if we're taking cars off the road, we can find a way to solve that problem. It's quite a bit different in our view than displacing other versions of transportation that might have existed previously, if that makes sense.
Commissioner Den.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Do you do this? Will you come down to Southern California and do this? Or you're not in Southern California yet, right?
Well, I saw the next meeting's in San Diego, and it's been a while since I've seen that kind of sun. So
yeah,
I'm happy to be there.
We can get your contact information because I want to talk to you offline.
Absolutely. My co-founder is my brother, and he's better looking and smarter. So if you want him, he's probably available too.
Even better. Okay, so I love social solutions to economic problems. I
Awesome.
think it's totally the way to go. The interesting thing for me, though, and we're seeing this with Airbnb, with Uber, with Lyft, government eventually catches up about 10 years after you've already established these things.
Yep.
What are you seeing already where government might be messing around in your system?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll tell you, honestly, I believe us to be different than all of those businesses, and either I'm naive or we are. And the reason why is because it is really hard for us to make a list of the people that lose out if we succeed. I could tell you who they are. There's really just one answer there. I prefer not to make it. Right? It's less cars means less stuff that goes into cars, right? But other than that, the reality is that no one in this room will be disappointed if 50% of the population of California starts carpooling with Scoop. Everyone will be happy. We will have less congestion.
Yeah.
We will have less emissions. We will save money. We will have to build fewer highways. We will have to invest less in road repair because there will be less wear and tear on the roads themselves. I think in the situation with other on-demand businesses, as they're so called, usually there is an existing enterprise that is being displaced as a result of the innovation, and I will withhold any opinion or judgment on that. I'm simply saying I think here we found very willing and interested partners in all respects, and candidly have not been met with any public pushback, thankfully, and I hope that continues.
So when do you think you'll get into the LA area?
in hopefully later this year or early next, without
Later this year.
sharing too
Okay,
much.
so
but,
before you do, make sure that you update your photograph here, because we do have managed lanes on both the 10 and the I-10 and the 110.
absolutely, yeah, actually,
So,
right nearly
it's
at
an old
that new
photograph.
Santa
Those are
Monica
the
exit,
only
like
two roads
exit
he's not going
4.
on.
That's, yeah, right.
Awesome.
Anyway,
Absolutely,
thank
we
you.
will.
I'll follow up with more.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
Jim?
John, great presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Is that on? Yeah. I realize you market to a lot of the major companies, Cisco.
That's correct.
I live in San Francisco. I've heard of Lyft, I've heard of Uber, I've heard of Flywheel. Never heard of you guys. What are you doing to market to the average Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. So strategically, we're oriented around the enterprises that we work with, right? It's the way that we build density from an early stage. Of course, as we grow, we would like to build a bigger consumer profile. It helps us expand the network to folks who work at small businesses or independent contractors that happen to be near our employer partners. We do quite a lot of marketing. I'll be honest, the most effective marketing for our dollar is to work with our employer partners. The one thing I'll use to distinguish from what you're pointing out is our business is not in San Francisco proper for the most part. We operate the vast majority of our trips down the peninsula to Palo Alto, Sunnyvale, San Jose, even into the East Bay. And I think the key there is that our solution is for the people that normally are driving on average 20 miles to work every day. If you live in San Francisco, which I do, and if you work in San Francisco, which I also do, there are buses, there are taxis, there are private rideshare companies, there are companies like Chariot, there's lots of different things. I have a lot of options if I live in a dense urban environment. The stat, candidly, that we always talk about at Scoop, and this is meant with all respect to the investments that we've made with public transportation in California, is that if you live in one of the 100 top suburban markets in the country, 80% of jobs are not accessible within 90 minutes by public transportation. So put a different way, if I want to move or if I want to have control over where I live, I need to get a job. And right now, in order to do that, I need to have a car to get there. And that's why 80% of people drive alone. That's who we care about. The people who live in the city have lots of options, and you guys in this room are doing awesome things to make that be the case. But candidly, building rail that will get you all the way around the Bay Area it's not something that's going to happen.
But we have a lot of people who live in the city who work outside of the city.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So we tend to market through them through where they're headed, through their employer, and actually we do quite a bit of volume from folks who reside in San Francisco. And I think maybe the short answer is we just need to keep on pushing the marketing and try to build the brand even bigger than we have already.
Thank you.
Is there an ADA component to this?
Not yet, and that's candidly, it's one of the things that we're disappointed in ourselves with. It's a challenge. Having been up and running for all of 10 months, we've got to find a way to figure that out and to figure out how to handle accessibility issues, or rather accessibility opportunities, to think about how to pair those types of people up. I think it would require us to think what is the right approach here. You probably can't just start connecting anybody with anybody if those are the considerations. I think we'd love to have an accessibility option that would take people who have similar concerns, especially people who have similarly specially fitted vehicles if they exist, to combine them. But it's something we've actually been talking to the MTC folks about to figure out how we can handle. So I appreciate you asking that.
Very good. Thank
you guys very much. I appreciate it.
Great presentation. I was going to welcome Assemblymember Frazier, but it looks like he stepped out. Oh, here he is, right here. I would like to welcome him to the meeting. Item 13, state and federal legislative matters. Eric.
Thank you, Commissioners. Can you hear me? Is this working? This is an action item, as usual, so there isn't a lot in the item itself, but staff does recommend that the Commission accept the staff report and provide direction on any legislation of interest that we aren't already covering. As you are aware, the end of the two-year session is fast approaching, August 31st. According to the Constitution, the legislature can't pass bills after that unless they are fiscal bills, urgency bills, or in a special session. There's a lot moving right now. Of the 18 bills that the Commission has taken a position on this spring, there are 7 that continue to move through the legislative process, 5 of those being bills that the Commission has support positions on, and 2 that the Commission has taken an opposition position on. And they are continuing to move. This is tomorrow, I believe, is the last day for policy committees to hear these bills. However, as far as I know, except for AB 2170, which is being heard today, Assemblymember Frazier's bill in EQ. I don't know how that bill went, but all the other bills have passed out of the policy committee and are either on to the floor or appropriations committee. So that's what's going on with those bills. Assemblymember Frazier, how did 2170 go?
So.
All right, sounds good. So there you go. All the bills that you have supported are continuing to move, or that are still live. And if there are any other questions, or if there are any bills in the attachment A that you want me to provide more additional information on, please let me know.
Any questions? Very good, thank you.
This was an action item.
Oh, it is an action item.
It is an action item, so if I could.
And
Just to accept the report.
just to accept the report.
Move acceptance of the report.
Motion by Commissioner Dunn, second by Commissioner Arp. Any further questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Item 14. Eric.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Stephen Keck with Caltrans, here today to give you a budget update and to update you on the status of our allocation capacity for the current year, as well as some draft allocation capacity for next year. In the current year, we have allocated about 55% of the allocation capacity through the May commission meeting. It's not unusual, this commission meeting is not unusual in that it's a very heavy commission meeting in June. We generally have a lot of allocations in June to be made. So we'll see a great deal of this remaining capacity allocated today. Any capacity that is not allocated today will roll over into next year. And this is a picture of what next year's capacity looks like right now. First, let me say that these capacities are a bit smaller than normal because we've got a lot more funds in different programs now than we've had in the past. And I mean smaller in terms of text size. In terms of the total allocation capacity, we're looking at $2.8 billion for next year. Again, this is without rollover capacity. These numbers are in line with the adopted fund estimates, so we don't see any surprises here. I'll note this is only slightly less than what we have this year, and when we roll capacities over, it will probably be very similar to what we've had in the current year. As Director Dougherty did mention, the governor did sign the budget already this year. In addition to signing Laurel's proclamation, he took time out to sign the budget as well. The governor did not make any vetoes in this budget, which is unusual, and that is the first time since 1982-83 fiscal year that a budget was passed without vetoes. So that's, I don't even know how many years ago that is. Any guesses as to what governor that was?
Well, it would be the same one.
That would be the same one, Governor Brown. So this is only the second time in any recent memory this has happened, which I think shows the strength of the state and the great deal of effort that went into coming up with a budget that could be accepted by all. In general, the budget is a slight increase over the current year for general budget purposes, $7 billion increase in general fund. There is a $2 billion rainy day fund deposit, and there's, as again Director Dougherty mentioned, no significant transportation overhaul, and again we're waiting for a special session to perhaps take that up. On the transportation side, again, Director Dougherty covered this very well. This is really a graphical presentation of what was already discussed. Over the last 10 years, there's been a decrease in staffing of about 4,200 positions at Caltrans, and the budget has decreased about the same percentage over that time. And again, the budget for 16-17 is the lowest since the year before Prop 1B, when it was also below $10 billion. Give you a little update on the status of the aeronautics account. When the fund estimate for the aeronautics account was adopted, there are assumptions in there related to transfers allowed in law between the local airport loan account and the aeronautics account. And the fund estimate assumed that a $1.3 million transfer would be made in current year and $4 million in each year thereafter for the period of the fund estimate. So these transfers are allowed in law, and they're made at the request of the Commission and the Department and approved by the Department of Finance. The Department of Finance did finally approve the current year transfer of $1.3 million after initially denying that transfer in March. And each of the successive years, we're going to have to go through this again, where we will go to the Department of Finance for approval, convince them that it's the right thing to do, and hopefully get approval. I bring this up because it's not an automatic thing. It's something that we're going to have to work hard at, keep diligent on, and to ensure that we can fully fund the aeronautics program that was adopted in the fund estimate. And finally, I seem to be moving very fast today. Looking at upcoming events, remind everybody, folks who don't need a reminder, but the excise tax, the price-based excise tax on gasoline does decrease on July 1st from 12 cents today down to 9.8 cents. If anybody listening is new to this program, this is a decrease from 18 cents the year before and 21.5 cents the year before that. It's a very significant blow to transportation, something that we've talked about in every meeting since January at least. Diesel, we don't talk about as much. There's actually going to be an increase in the diesel excise tax related to the fact that the price-based part of the diesel, the sales tax, is actually decreasing. So we're making up for it, remaining revenue neutral by increasing the excise tax. Again, as Director Dougherty mentioned and Secretary Kelly, the road charge pilot kicks off on Friday. I have installed the device in my car. I'm ready to go. I know lots of folks are expecting their device still. It comes in a really cool box. I've seen 2 different brands now. It's kind of fun. It was really fun trying to find the port last night, but it's an exciting thing, and I've already looked up my data for my trip this morning to see how I did. It's actually really a lot of great information, so that's kind of a fun thing. And then in August, we'll bring to the Commission...
I'm sorry for you.
You know what?
You need more excitement in your life.
I honestly believe that the way to get people interested in this stuff is to provide metrics. It's the same as your Fitbit, if you have one, I old-fashioned. You want to see how you did. And I honestly think my behavior might even change as a result of seeing this data. And I think that's a value added to the service. I think it's kind of a neat thing. The last point, though, is next month in August, I will bring to the Commission the final allocation capacity for next year based on any rollovers that we may have from the current year. So we're off to a pretty good start for next year. And with that, I'll be happy to take questions.
Any questions?
One comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I have a question on page number 5, the budget and the staffing. And I know it's always a hot discussion, but if I look at budgeting for dummies here for me, it's hard to really understand this chart if you just look at, there has to be more to the story, right?
Oh, certainly. So this chart is a budget for Caltrans over the last 10 years. It starts, the first year there is the first year that included Proposition 1B. Over time, it has fluctuated mildly, but generally in a downward trend as we finished Proposition 1B projects. Staffing has followed generally the same trend and stands at next year at 19,000. I have 19,045. I believe Director Dougherty mentioned 19,044. It's because there's a 0.3 in there. And if you like to cut people in half, you can go down to 44, which is the number I gave the director earlier. If you like to keep them whole, we round up to 45. What's interesting about this is the year before Prop 1B, this is the year before we got all the money. The staffing level at Caltrans was 21,700. So we're actually going down as a result of workload, but we're also going down as a result of increases in efficiency. So we have seen a commensurate decrease in staff, and B, a doing more with less kind of thing going on as we go over time. And finally, the third point I'll mention with regards to the budget, in our minds these days, we're very much thinking about the STIP and the impact of the STIP. The $750 million deprogramming of the STIP that we just undertook was huge. But in the same time period, the shop has increased by more than $1.5 billion over the shop period. That's a 15% increase in the shop, and that's primarily due to federal funding increases over the last 10 years. They were incremental. We call them minor, a few hundred million there and here, but it adds up. And so, the STIP is a huge decrease in a very short period of time, but we was also seeing increases in the shop over the same period of time.
Jim?
Just a little historical fact about the previous time back in 1982. That was also when we passed a 2-cent gas tax increase. For those who are around, I don't see too many, but there are a few. Doesn't sound like much, but considering we've lost about 12 cents and just having the 12 cents back and an extra 2 would be pretty good right now.
Definitely. It was 7 cents to 9 cents at that time, I think. Is that what it was?
Lucy?
Just a quick question, Stephen. This is always baffling to me because I have to figure out what it means when you say what you say. And when we talk about 19,000 positions, is that 19,000, because you can't do a 0.4 bodies, is that 19,000 bodies employed by Caltrans, or is that just positions open, whether or not there's bodies in them or not?
So this number, the 19,000, represents the budgeted number of positions for next year.
Right.
So ideally, we would have them all fully staffed.
Right.
But I can't tell you what it will be at the end. So that is the authorized position level for next year.
Got it. It's helpful to get us to understand that or be able to articulate it better than we are. I'm sharing too much information, but there's a couple of folks certainly in my neck of the woods that they're kind of like a broken clock where they'll get 2 things right out of 12, and then you think that the clock is telling the right time and it's not. And I'd sure like to be able to push back with correct information if you get my drift. Mm-hmm. And so, and that's why the way government tells stories is so odd to me, that it would help us if we could get actually real live bodies. This is the projected, but right now they truly have either gone down or they're not going down, or we expect to hire more, or whatever the story is.
Right, certainly. I can provide that information at the next meeting.
That'd be helpful. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Malcolm, do you still want to comment? No? Brian?
Hey, Stephen, just a question for you. You mentioned the impact of the gas tax swap activity that BOE takes and the impact that has. But do you know, just in your assessment looking forward for the next fiscal year, is there any expectation based on gas prices now, what you think happens next year? I don't mean a specific number, but I mean the trend.
So the trend has actually been up a little bit from what I think was expected even earlier this year when the new rate was adopted. I think the problem with the 9.8 cent rate is that it is more based on overcollections in prior years than it is based on the current price. So I think next year, I think it's very likely we'll see an increase of some kind in the rate. But again, this is 367 days ahead of schedule here. So I would hesitate to name a number. The fund estimate assumes 12 cents. I don't think that's out of line at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Item 15, Mitchell.
Item 15 is a Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee and a pilot program update. And this is listed as an action item, but this is for information only. No action is required. I'm pleased to be at least the third person to tell you that the pilot kicks off on July 1st. As Malcolm mentioned, there were over 7,800 vehicles or people who volunteered, which represent about 10,000 vehicles. We're hoping that 5,000 of those enroll. The website is going to be going back up to allow more people to volunteer if they haven't volunteered already. So hopefully we can make sure we meet that 5,000. And with that, I would note the Technical Advisory Committee met last Friday. We discussed a couple of policy issues. we will continue to have those meetings quarterly and start bringing those policy issues to you so the commission can weigh in on those. That concludes my report.
Question, just a motion to accept the report. Is that what it is?
You don't have to.
We don't have to do anything. Okay. Thank you. Item 16. Garth.
Sure. Commissioners, this is a pink item in your agenda book, and it's an action item. Executive Order B-2315 was issued in July 2015, directing the agency secretaries of Transportation, Environmental Protection, and Natural Resources to lead other relevant state departments to develop an integrated action plan by July 2016 that establishes clear targets to improve freight efficiency, transition to zero-emission technologies, and increase competitiveness of California's freight transportation system. 4 primary state agencies were actually involved in the development of this action plan, and those agencies are ARB, Caltrans, the Energy Commission, and the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. As part of this effort, the Freight Efficiency Strategies Development Group was formed, which was composed of freight experts from academia, industry, and government. The main purpose of this group was to prepare a series of 6 white papers that identify promising strategies for increasing the efficiency of the freight system. The actual draft action plan, which was reviewed by staff, was released for public comment on May 3rd, and comments are due by July 6th. In the Commission's comment letter, staff listed a total of 11 separate comments. In general, the attached staff comments recommend clarification of policy direction and definition and clarification of key terms used in the document. Staff comments also suggest additional information should be included on the 3 pilot projects that were identified in the plan. Lastly, this plan has long-reaching impacts on California's vital freight industry. Given the concern that has been expressed by some of the freight industry representatives regarding the need to have a broader stakeholder engagement involvement on the development of this action plan, Commission staff suggests the state agencies involved in the development of this plan seek an extension to the July 2016 deadline as stipulated in the executive order. Staff is recommending that you approve the Commission's comment letter on the draft Sustainable Freight Action Plan. That's all I have.
Questions? Motion by Ghimetti, second by Arp. Any further questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have a speaker. Matt Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt Robinson on behalf of the Pacific Merchant Shipping Association. We represent all the ocean-going carriers and terminal operators. We support the goals that have been established in the Governor's Executive Order on Sustainable Freight. We do believe that future investments can result in both economic competitiveness as well as the reduction in the environmental impacts that we're seeing from our sector. That being said, the state's historically relied on the private sector to make the majority of investments in the freight system, whether it be lease revenue bonds, paid through fees, or just a straight private investment. The true, I guess, last slug of funding into the freight system in the state was the $2 billion that was invested by Prop 1B into that TCIF program. And we believe very strongly that if we're going to carry out the goals that have been established in this order, we need more money going into the TCIF. So we would ask that the Commission continue to stay engaged on this as we seek future transportation funding. And I'd very quickly just like to thank Secretary Kelly for his efforts on the Sustainable Freight Strategy, as well as Chair Frazier for his strong desire to get us more money into the TCIF in order to make the types of investments that would be included in a plan like this. And then finally, I had the privilege of being able to have lunch with Laurel today, her last lunch before a commission meeting. I guess you wouldn't count tomorrow's breakfast. And I have to say that she's pretty eager to get on to the next chapter of her life. So I'm not sure what's happened for the last decade or two, but Laurel, it's really been a pleasure. I know we've worked together sporadically, and just thank you so much for your efforts, and thank you for indulging me for that.
Any questions? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. Any further questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 17. Laura.
Commissioners, this is an informational update on the Regional Transportation Plan and California Transportation Plan guidelines development process. We will be holding a kickoff meeting for all interested stakeholders tomorrow, June 30th, from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. here in Lincoln Plaza Auditorium. This meeting will also be webcast. The kickoff will provide an overview of the process and schedule to update the RTP guidelines and develop first ever CTP guidelines. The meeting will also feature 4 panel presentations. These panels will include representatives from federal, state, local, and regional agencies, as well as tribal governments and organizations representing environmental conservation, social equity, public health, business, and freight. Panelists will share their perspectives on important policy considerations in the state and regional transportation planning process. Release of initial draft RTP and CTP guidelines for public comment is expected in the first week of July. Work groups will be organized to discuss specific topics in the guidelines, such as SB 375 implementation and climate change, modeling, freight, public health, social equity, and active transportation. Work groups will serve as facilitated, consensus-driven forums for stakeholders to develop technical and policy guidance in these areas. Stakeholder engagement through work groups and public comment will take place from July through October. We anticipate that final RTP and CTP guidelines will be presented to the Commission for consideration in December. That concludes my update. I'm happy to take any questions or feedback you may have.
Questions? None? Thank you. Item 18.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 18 is the third quarter fiscal year 15-16 delivery report. Normally, the delivery committee hears these reports ahead of time, but this time the delivery committee was busy with another very hot topic, so it didn't hear this report. But Jim Davis is here to present it. This is a ongoing effort that the delivery reports keep on being improved, and Jim will go over some of the new improvements in the report.
Thank you, Commissioners. Jim Davis, Capital Outlay Support Program Manager with Caltrans. The second page of your presentation has an illustration that just documents and projects the project delivery process. It is color-coded to our performance metrics on the third page for reference. So looking at our forecasted goals versus completion, we anticipate to meet our goal of draft environmental documents. We anticipate to meet our goal of project approval environmental documents. And we anticipate to meet our annual allocation right-of-way funds. There are 3 performance measures that we're projected not to meet, and those were discussed by Director Doherty about the handful of projects that will probably not be delivered by tomorrow evening. The last one on the performance metrics on this project is projects constructed on time, and we're projected to meet this particular performance metric. On the next page is looking at it from the budget side. For the 24 completed STIP projects to date, we are meeting our annual goal of being under 100% with a 97% delivery. And for costs of the 176 completed SHOP projects, we'll be under the 100% goal with a projection of about 90%. The next slide talks about a little bit more detail about the schedule risks that Director Doherty mentioned. We have one project that will not be delivered for sure, and that was a project I brought to your attention on the Ferguson slide where we had a massive landslide on that particular project. We also are forecasting 3 other projects not to be delivered. On the high risk, we know that one project will be delivered and one has not, so there's 2 that's still outstanding in the next 24 hours. And then the 4 low to medium risks have actually been delivered. So there are 7 projects on my watch list right now that we're watching very closely.
That's out of how many again?
That's out of 244. So we're anticipating somewhere around a 97 or 98% delivery rate. The next slide looks at construction budget management. We have 7 projects that are currently seeking an allocation with a potential with a budget of $40 million and a potential risk of $11 to $12 million. That's potential risk, not necessarily risk that will materialize. We have 5 projects in the process of advertising with a budget of $33 million with a potential risk of $13 to $14 million. And we have 15 projects in construction with a current budget of $847 million with a potential risk of $100 to $130 million. On average, what we're seeing is about 3% of our projects and 3% of the dollars come back for supplemental funds with those risks. These numbers are obviously much, much greater than that 3%. But one of our commitments to the Commission was to make sure that we were transparent in identifying all those particular risks to you. The next page is projects that are being managed by others, and there are two mega projects, the P3 project in the San Francisco area and the Gel Desmond project down in the port of LA that have budgets in the neighborhood of $2 billion, and they have somewhere in the range of risk in the $150 to $160 million range. Next, I'll talk about some of the improvements that we've put since the last quarter on this particular report. And working with commission staff, especially Executive Director Susan Branson, we've put in, started adding the schedule, what was our original schedule commitment to go to construction versus what we actually accomplished. And as you look through the report, you'll see projects that were accelerated and then projects that slipped. And so we provide that information for you. We've also, with the adoption of the 2016 SHOP, we'll be able to provide the scope and look at the primary metric that was approved by you going forward, and then what we actually did at the end of construction. And so we can compare and evaluate and provide lessons learned on how to improve. There are two projects I'd like to focus and illustrate on successes and where we put in our money and what we've accomplished. The first is the I-15 Mira Mesa Direct Access Ramp project in San Diego. It was a partnership project with Sandag using CMIA funds. What it does is create these direct access ramps that goes into the Miramar College Transit Station. This is a multimodal project, ties into that transit station. It also added sidewalks and bike lanes. It definitely reflects our mission of Caltrans being a safe, sustainable, integrated, and efficient transportation system. It also has an innovation included, and that has swivel joints in the ramps, and that's going to allow the bridge to move in all directions. And what that should do is help reduce maintenance costs and increase the life cycle of this particular project. So really good things. And there's a show of actually in use with the bus on top of it. The next project, which is not nearly as exciting, but it is our bread and butter, and it is Fix It First project, is the Route 99 East Merced overhead project, and it replaces an aging bridge there. We've worked in close coordination with the railroad to get this accomplished, and like I said, that is our bread and butter at Caltrans with our shop. And this concludes my presentation. Are there any comments?
Jim?
Yeah, Jim, just out of curiosity, that the work you did on the moving of the bridge, was that in conjunction with UC San Diego Engineering Department?
Commissioner Gilmody, I'm not sure of that. I'd have to go back and check.
They did some interesting research down there on earthquakes. Anyway, thank you.
We do work very closely with UC San Diego on earthquake engineering, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Jim?
Chair, could you provide some information on us with the unanticipated slide that we had up on Highway 3 and the resulting landslides on the existing project? Were those able to be captured, all those other slides in that area in this year's construction budget?
So there was, I'm not sure I understand your question.
Highway 3 had a collapse this year up in the Trinity Alps.
Okay.
And then the project adjacent to that, or before that, had a lot of slides due to construction. Were we able to capture all those slides, those unanticipated slides for geological conditions? Were we able to get that funded also and fixed?
I believe that's the one, and I think it's the one that's later on the agenda. Correct me wrong, Steve.
Yes, there is a request for supplemental funds to pay for those slides on that highway. That'll be on the agenda tomorrow. But I think the slides have been removed. We just need to pay the contractor.
Okay, and then with the Tex-Mex wash last year, and we had some federal emergency money, how much money was involved from the agency on that unanticipated need also, that diminished the shop?
I'll have to go back and
if you could,
get that
please.
information for you.
It's not working. There we go. So if I could address that briefly, we do have a emergency response reservation that we set aside within the shop so that when we have these unanticipated incidents, we're not deleting projects to cover that. So if we needed more money, we would then augment that later in the year.
How much is that reserve?
Offhand, I have to check on the reserve for it.
Yeah, because we're talking about several projects that were unanticipated.
Yes.
The emergency reserve is about $140 million per year.
Thank you. Okay. Item 20, Lori?
I think we're on item 19.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. So we missed 19. Okay, we're going to 19 now.
Okay, thank you. So item 19 is an action item. With the recent passage of AB 133, the TCRP fund has received $148 million, which is just enough to cover the currently programmed projects, and there's an attachment of those projects in your book item. So given that the bill did not include a guarantee for additional funding, staff is coming forward today to ask to recommend the following policy to use the $148 million. We're recommending to allow programming amendments to the current programmed amounts for the Tier 2 projects, no new or additional programming for Tier 2 projects until new additional money is identified, and process the allocations for eligible Tier 2 projects on a first-come, first-served basis. The intent of this policy is to give the priority to the currently programmed projects, and as the status of the program changes or the status of the projects change, we can come back and revise the policy at a later date. Staff recommends approval.
There's a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni. There's a second by Commissioner Dunn. We have two speakers, Patricia Chen and Mark Watts.
Chairman Alvarado and members, I'll pass on speaking, and while Ms. Chen is coming forward, I'm satisfied with where you're heading and appreciate the attention to this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Patricia?
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. I'm Patricia Chen from LA Metro. Commissioners, we are very grateful for the expeditious implementation of the AB 133 funding for TCRP. We are eager to see the funds flow again in the program and for the money to get on the street for ready-to-go projects with a funding need. Over time, since the program has run into revenue difficulties, some projects have already moved forward with other funds that can no longer be reimbursed. And our region has one of the projects on the list in item 19 that is in this situation. We also have two projects on the list that are ready to go with programmed as well as unprogrammed needs that we would like to have considered for programming. One is a freight project on a state highway, and the other is a significant regional transit corridor. Our main objective is to see the funding made available for ready-to-go projects as soon as possible. And so we would ask that the work be expedited in terms of the fact-finding necessary to do this. Thank you.
Jim?
Yeah, I would just like to point out to your first point about projects that you had already moved forward, there are other regions that are in the same boat and are relying on these funds for that reason. So I think that we need to keep in mind that a lot of folks are hanging out there, you know, with projects that they felt they had commitments for.
Fran?
Well, I think the greater tragedy is that this was congestion relief, and I think the initial work was done in 2000 by Governor Davis, perhaps. Is that when this money first came? And so for us to even be having this discussion today, while we're all stuck in gridlock, I think is pretty tragic. So maybe when we have our funding discussion, we can talk about not talking about it 16 years later. And so I think we have some very, very real needs. I do have concern with, we have so many needs. So I think any dollars that are available to us, let's get them to work as fast as we possibly can. So if we have to take a look at this list, I realize this is the best list that we have that adds up to 148 million, which is the magic number we have to come to for this requirement. But I do want to put just a sense of urgency around assessing where we are and not letting $1 sit when it could be relieving some congestion and creating jobs.
Thank you. Any further comment? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Commissioners, this is item 20 is an information item. Native American tribal governments are eligible recipients of the Active Transportation Program funds. However, implementing agencies are required to enter into master agreements with Caltrans. Many tribes are reluctant to enter into a master agreement because California law requires the tribes to agree to a limited waiver of sovereign immunity. An alternative vehicle to a master agreement is to execute an intergovernmental funds transfer agreement. One such agreement has recently been finalized between Caltrans, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the La Jolla Tribe of Liseño Indians. This is a landmark agreement that paves the way for similar agreements with other tribes. However, it took a very long time to get the agreement finalized, which caused significant delays in the tribe's project. Ray Zhang from Caltrans will make a presentation on the challenges and successes of reaching this agreement. Also here today is Adam Geisler, the Secretary of the La Jolla Tribal Council. Secretary Geisler was instrumental in putting together the agreement. So I'd like to acknowledge him and thank him for traveling here today, and he'll probably like to speak as well.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ray Zhang, Division Chief Caltrans Local Assistance. I'm here to provide an update on the progress that we're making on getting fundings for transportation project administered by the Native American tribal governments. And like Lori mentioned, we're able to reach this first agreement for a funding transfer agreement, working through the Bureau of Indian Affairs in the Federal Interior Department. So I wanted to congratulate Adam and also the BIA on getting this transfer agreement done. The first funding has been transferred through FHWA to the BIA, about $350,000 to allow the La Jolla tribe to start the environmental phase of this project. And then the other part of the transfer will happen once the environmental project is completed. So this has been, it's been it's a partnership effort. For like Lori mentioned, for a long time we have been having difficulty getting the funding to the Indian Native American tribes because of our law required them to have to sign a limited waiver of the sovereignty, and a lot of the tribes are hesitate in doing that. So what this agreement will allow us to do is it transfers over $4.8 million ATP funds to the BIA's Tribal Transportation Program, which is a federally funded program through FHWA. And then the BIA has been long relationship with the different tribes, and they can make the TPP funds available, in this case to the La Jolla tribe, for their ATP projects. So it's a breakthrough in getting the funding. And it also provides a template for us to work with, other tribal governments in the California. In California, we have about 110 federally recognized tribes, and so this will really help with that process. It involves a great partnership collaboration by the commissioner staff, by Caltrans, the agency, BIA, FHWA, and also the tribal governments working with us. But like Lori mentioned, it also took over about a year to get us here. So the next slide shows kind of the timeline of the different events that happened. So, about May of 2015, there was a partnership meeting that kind of kicked off this whole process. And it was attended by the former Executive Director Kempton, current Executive Director Branson, Caltrans, our Chief Deputy Director, people, staff from the BIA and also the tribal government. That's when the framework was start developing about we wanted to pursue this route so the funding can be transferred to the BIA through an agreement, funding transfer agreement that is allowed by the federal law. So by June is people, staff started working and, started developing the initial draft agreement. When we first started, we thought we had some models from states like Minnesota and some other states that had transferred funding to the Indian tribes in those states. But as we were working on it, we realized there has, MAP 21 had made changes to the Indian funding and agreement, and that requires, additional review on the, so the template we had didn't quite work. So basically we have to develop some new thing in getting the agreement. As the process is moving on, near the end of last year, the federal government also enacted the new federal authorization, the FAST Act. I think because of the what new in the MAP 21, so it just causes people to be cautious about reevaluating, what is meant in the new federal act and make sure that we're in conformance. So by February of 2016, the revised agreement was developed to conform to the FAST Act, and then by May of this year, Caltrans and then La Jolla signed the agreement, and then June is when the BIA signed the agreement, and then the funding was transferred. Like I said, the first funding got transferred of $350,000 to the BIA, and so the tribe government can start the environmental phase of the work. So in this process, there's challenges on developing understanding of the law and the rules and understanding the roles and responsibility of each party in this process. And also, we're all new to this process in the relationship, especially, we have federal agencies that are, away in Washington, D.C., sort of developing the relationship, and also making sure that the agreement is in conformance with any new federal law or any new requirements in this process. But I'm also happy to report that because of this groundbreaking, agreement, that it will allow us to now work with other Indian governments, tribal government in this process. For Cycle 2, we also have the Hoopa tribal government also receiving ATP funds. That agreement has already been, fund transfer agreement been drafted, and it's in the BIA for review. And, I fully expect that to take be much faster because we already have the experience and have it kind of set up. Of course, each tribal government, have different, specifics in their constitution. So there may be differences, but because we already have this process worked out, it should be faster. We're also looking at other options. For example, FHWA had indicated their Central Federal Land Highway Division, which is kind of like the mini DOT within federal highways, that they are working with the tribal government in developing the project, so funding can be transferred to the Central Federal Land Highway. So that's one other option. And some tribal government also are willing to look at our master agreement and see if it will be acceptable for them to take the limited waiver of sovereignty. So with that, I will take questions. And that's all I have.
Thank you for a good report. What is the project? What's the scope? What are you going to build?
I'll probably this is the Indian, this is the La Jolla tribe active transportation projects. Maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Welcome. I'm from San Diego, too.
Wonderful. If this is an opportunity for me to also make my comments, I'd like to be able to do that as well, if it's the will of the chair of the board. Miriam Machashayikam, Nom Adam Geisler, John Lanoyanai, Bayom Kuicham. Good afternoon. My name is Adam Geisler, and I'm the secretary on the Tribal Council for the La Jolla Band of Luiseño Indians, located in northeast San Diego County. I'm here today, and I'm going to take a second because this is an endeavor that has taken over 5 years in order to get to this historic point and a point where funds are actually being allocated through this agreement. So in short, to answer your question, Commissioner, we have both infrastructure and non-infrastructural elements associated with this project, totaling about $4.8 million, where we are going to be putting in walking trails, sidewalks, benches, signage. We're also going to be working on the other E's that are out there, enforcement, education, and working with our local law enforcement, tribal law enforcement to enforce the facilities that we're going to be putting along both our state highway, which runs through the middle of our residential community at 55, so everybody's doing 70 miles an hour, as well as doing education outreach with our local school districts. Multiple school districts are going to be involved in some PedSafe activities, as well as our after-school program, so that our community understands how to utilize the facilities that we're putting in. So with that being said, as I mentioned earlier, this is a historic moment. For the last 7 years that I've been involved as an elected leader for my community, I was kind of tossed into transportation, being its sexy self that transportation is. I had to laugh at some of the earlier presentations. This is not the most exciting topic, but it's something that impacts all of our communities and our economies and our environment. So with that being said, there's a number of gratitudes that I want to put forward as I make my comments here today. First and foremost being the governor's office and Secretary Kelly. The governor moved forward with a consultation initiative with all of the state agencies when he came into office and announced that on Indian Day, as well as a proclamation, I believe over 6 years ago. And through those efforts and works that have been underway, through the work of Secretary Kelly, Director Dougherty, former Director Kimpton, and all the other staff that have been here, now Director Branson, we've been able to grow a number of different partnerships and grow the understanding between our communities. And at the end of the day, I want to talk a little bit about what the benefits are for this project to my community. In addition to it addressing the fatality issues that we had along our highway, where we had tribal members literally hit by vehicles driving through our residential community, it's also obviously going to bring jobs. It's going to improve environmental benefits, reducing less than mile or mile and a half trips to and from the bus stops. And most importantly, it's going to improve the safety of our pedestrians and our youth. In addition to that, the benefits that are associated with this fund transfer also allow for direct fund transfers to occur between the state of California up to the federal government and then down to the tribal government through our intergovernmental fund transfer agreement, where everybody's sovereignty is respected. And part of the challenge that tribes face in wanting to do a waiver or not wanting to do a waiver is that there's no reciprocal relationship when we talk about doing a waiver of sovereign immunity. Often those agreements have consent to waive to state court, however, the state will not consent to tribal court. So utilizing this process where, as a trustee, the federal government takes on the responsibility, and that literally means taking on the responsibility of the funds and alleviating that from the state, is a big deal. And I'm proud to say that in partnership with the state of California, this is the first ever to be done in a state that has over 20% of the tribes in the nation, of the 567 tribes, 110, to lay out this template for the rest of the country. So I applaud, again, the staff and the team that are here. You're going to hear a little bit about some of the, you're going to see a deferral shortly in front of you, and you're probably going to scratch your head about how come there's a request for deferral. And the short answer is good things take time. Doing something new, having two different laws changing, MAP 21 and the FAST Act, and trying to maneuver within the legalese of those two forms of legislation while navigating this agreement made it challenging, and as a result, we need to take a little bit more time. But I also want to say that this is a common sense approach, and that's another thing I appreciate about all the team that have been involved in doing this. at the end of the day, to get a good project out to a good community that needs these types of solutions. Tribal consultation with this occurred at all levels, all the way from the governor's office to the local level to the local assistance team. I remember the meeting that we had when we were looking at the understanding how do I get a number to put a load code on a form because I don't have a master agreement. And I really appreciate the flexibility of the local assistance staff in order to navigate that process. But it did take consultation at all levels in our District 11. In addition to that, it took recognition that tribes are a part of California's fabric and California's economy. We play a vital role. A number of you know Indian tribes because we have casinos. Well, guess what? I don't. And a majority of the tribes in California are non-gaming. We have a campground and the world's longest zip line. It's the state's longest zip line that we just launched. So we're looking at other forms of economic development. There's a number of us out there that don't have the proximity to population in order to support other economic ventures. In addition to that, what the commission is doing today, what the secretary and everybody that's part of the secretary's team are moving forward with is setting a foundation for an ongoing relationship that continues to evolve in a positive nature. The transportation topics that the secretary has supported with tribal involvement is something that I'm not seeing anywhere else across the nation. And so I really, if it seems like I'm talking about this 5 or 6 different ways, it's because I'm really planning on doing that. It's a big deal. Nobody else is doing this. Lastly, I want to take just a quick second to thank Lori Water, Susan Branson, our local liaison, Chai Vargas, Malcolm, Secretary Kelly. There's a whole laundry list of folks that it took in order to pull this off. Getting 2 federal agencies, and that's the other thing that I think we should probably spend 30 seconds to talk about. This isn't just an agreement that works for tribes that get their money through the BIA. Some tribes actually get their money directly through FHWA. We have a choice. And so this template is going to work for both tribes that get their money directly through FHWA and the BIA. So it took 2 federal agencies in order to get involved into this master template, as well as the state and tribal governments. And so with that, I've probably taken more time than I should on a typical comment period, but it's taken 5 years to get here, as I said. And I'll take my 2 seconds more to again thank you, congratulate you for recognizing tribal sovereignty and the partnership that we have, recognizing the transportation needs, although may be jurisdictional and have boundaries, still don't impact the people that drive them or move on them, which are our families and the members of our community. So thank you for taking the initiative. And with that, if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to field them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just say, if I may, I'd just say congratulations to you. It sounds like you had to cut through a lot of red tape with a lot of different agencies. I'm glad Caltrans was so helpful, but I'm sure the tribe was sort of the quarterback. So, you know, I really do offer my congratulations. I'll have to go out there and check out your zip line sometime.
Anytime. Happy to have all of you.
Mr. Chair, if I can add also, let me congratulate Adam and the La Jolla tribe for their persistence. Adam had the good fortune and the pleasure of being first. We talked about it taking a lot longer time, but we were able to get through there. And this project was slowed by that process, but other projects are going to benefit not only the La Jolla tribe, but other tribes throughout the state, because now we've blazed that trail. And I think that we're going to be able to benefit from that in the long run. And I congratulate Adam and the tribe. And let me also ask, Adam spoke a little bit about his leadership within his tribe. He's been volunteered and involuntarily dragged into statewide leadership as well, and probably national leadership. And Adam has provided that on our Native American Advisory Committee as well. He's very active. So I want to thank him for that in this public setting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I'll add my congratulations as well. But does anybody add up all the man hours or person hours, to be politically correct, I guess I should say, that have gone into getting us where we are? Because when I think about $4.5 million in 5 years to get the agreements together, it seems like we've spent an awful lot of man hours to be able to get where we are. So hopefully we have some lesson learned. I know you've talked about maybe this could become a template. However, we recognize that most of our agreements are unique. So somehow I think we need to be able to not have to spend 5 years and a gazillion hours trying to get the agreements done.
If I could make one comment. It actually, with the timeline that was presented just before myself, the agreement negotiations took about a year and a month or so, a year and 2 months. The overall 5 years started with our tribe's participation with our local MPO, Sandag, who has a tribal transportation working group, which I co-chair, where we actually worked together through California Department of Public Health, Sandag, Walk San Diego to do an active transportation assessment, as well as a healthy communities assessment. So I guess I was kind of outlining the start of recognizing some of the challenges, getting all of our different plans together, finding different funding sources, which led us to actually scoring 20th for the first cycle of active transportation. But it did take, still a year and a couple months is a year and a couple months too long when you're trying to deploy projects that impact community safety. So,
Mr. Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to kind of augment what Malcolm had said. It's not called volunteer, it's called voluntold. And on that aspect, but I think when you've described having the state's longest zip line, this commission needs to be invited to investigate the safety aspect of it going forward. Based on that, but us making investment in rural communities with ATP is paramount to be able to not only on the safety aspect of people driving through your community, but also working on the other aspect of doing the right thing and making sure that the rules are not left out. When you look at CalEnviroScreen and all the other aspects through disadvantaged communities, we need to do a better job. And so thank you for holding people's feet for the fire, but don't accept these long periods of time for implementation. Let us know if there's roadblocks. We need to be able to be a partner so that we make sure that this happens. So thank you.
Councilman Frazier, I know what happened to you last time you came back from San Diego, so I don't know. The safety thing is.
You look much better, though, I must say. There it is.
Item 21.
Mr. Chairman, just one more thing. When we have a presentation like that in the future, if staff could include a picture of the project, a visual. I mean, we're talking policy, but it would be nice to have seen what we're looking at here. Thanks.
Okay, Commissioners, tab 21, this is an action item to defer for up to 12 months the allocation of $4,505,000 in ATP funds to the La Jolla Band of Liseño Indians for their La Jolla Active Transportation Project in San Diego County. The tribe was awarded an ATP grant in the first cycle of the program. Commissioners, you just heard a presentation on the lengthy process involved in executing the intergovernmental fund transfer agreement between the La Jolla Band, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and Caltrans. The tribe was not in a position to take on the risk of starting the project without a signed agreement, so they have not been able to start work on the project. So by voting this deferral, we're basically stopping the clock so these funds do not lapse. We are only requesting this unusual action because of the extraordinary nature of this situation. Staff recommends you defer this allocation for up to 12 months.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Keel, second by Commissioner Inman. Any further questions? Adam, did you want to speak
Thank you for the
again?
reminder.
Okay. Well, you signed up for both of them. I'm just going to give you an opportunity to be humble. Yeah. Any other questions? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take a 10-minute break. So we